Hi, and welcome to Section 8, where we're going to experience the power of SwiftUI. In this section, we will get an introduction to the newly introduced framework called SwiftUI. Then we're going to create a demo project and are having a play with it. And last but not least, we will replicate basic user interface elements of our burger recipe app. Let's start with an introduction to SwiftUI. First, we will actually learn what SwiftUI is and what is different to what we've done until now. And then we will create a new project with SwiftUI and are going to have a play with it to get ourselves familiar. Let's start with a definition by Apple. Apple says that SwiftUI is an innovative, exceptionally simple way to build user interfaces across all Apple platforms with the power of Swift. So within that statement, there are a couple of interesting points. First one is Apple is saying that it's innovative and exceptionally simple. Then they're saying you're building user interfaces across all Apple platforms. And then they're saying just with the power of Swift. So what does that actually mean? Well, SwiftUI comes with a declarative syntax. That means you simply state what your user interface should do and should look like. And you're doing that in code and not inside a user interface builder anymore. This sounds like you're getting actually more code or have to write more code than before, but this is not true. You end up with having less boilerplate code and your code is actually even simpler and easier to read. It also comes with interesting design tools. Whenever you are updating your code, you actually get a real-time preview on the right-hand side that updates the user interface. So you end up with less building and running your app on the simulator or on the device. And then Apple also stated that it is native on all platforms. So whenever you're building your user interface with SwiftUI, Apple actually decides how the user interface should look like on the different platforms like on the iPhone, on the iPad, on Mac, or even on watchOS. Let's start with creating a new demo project in Xcode. So open up Xcode and select Create a new Xcode project. I'll make the window a little bit bigger. And we can select Single View App. Give it a name called SwiftUI Demo. And we have to make sure that we obviously select Swift as the programming language and SwiftUI for the user interface. Usually storyboard is selected here, so make sure that you're selecting SwiftUI. We can save it on a desktop and click Create. So now the first thing we notice is that there is a new window on the right hand side. This window is going to display the preview. So let's just hit resume as this is currently paused. This takes a while until the project is built and the preview is going to be displayed. So what we can see here is that we have a text on the left hand side and we can see the text inside an iPhone. So let's have a closer look at the code. What we have here is a struct called content view that is of type view. It has a variable called body, and then there's a new keyword that was introduced in Swift 5. It is called sum. And sum is a so-called opaque result type. This goes slightly into more detail, but an opaque result type basically preserves the identity of that type. It's similar to a protocol, whereas a protocol, such as here, does not preserve the type. So the sum keyword has some more features. What's important to notice is that whenever you're building a custom view, it has to be consisted of other views. So that's really important here. So now let's have a play with SwiftUI. First, we will have a look at the design tools. So select the label Hello World. Now if we command or press the command key and click on the label, we will get some context menu. What's interesting here is that if we click Show SwiftUI Inspector, we get some properties that we can change. So let's change the font, for example, to title. And we can see that the label immediately changes. What we can also see is that we now have added the font property to the text. So this is the first, what we can see what is meant by declarative syntax. So we just declare how the text should look like. So now that there are also a couple of predefined views within SwiftUI, we will have a look at them. There are some layout guides, so we can lay out views better. So first, let's have a look at the V-stack. That's basically a vertical aligned stack view. So if we're going to move our text inside the V-stack, and let's add another text that says, "Hello, great iOS programmer," we can see that those two labels or text views are going to be vertically aligned. There is also another layout guideline or layout guide that is also very helpful, and that's the horizontal stack. It is called H-stack, and what we're going to do here is we create a text that just says show detail, and next to the text we're going to create an animated button. So for now, let's just type in button, and we have to give it an action. We will implement that later, and the button gets an image with the system name called chevron.right.circle. So now we have a vertical stack that aligns two texts and the horizontal stack that aligns the text and the button. So now let's dig a little bit deeper into the declarative syntax, and we will see how easy it is to animate a button. So now, first we want to scale that a little bit, and we want to say .ImageScale large. Now the image gets a little bit bigger, and what we're going to explore now is a so-called state variable. This is also a really new and cool concept in SwiftUI. So let's just type add state, and then we call the variable show details, and it's actually a boolean, and we assign it to false. So what we can do with the state declaration is that this basically manages a property, and whenever the value of the state of the property changes, it invalidates the body variable and basically redraws all the views in here that are using the show details variable. So that's going to be recomputed basically. So whenever we're going to hit the button, we actually just toggle the boolean. So as we are inside a closure, we have to call self show details, and we just toggle it between true and false. So now whenever the value of show details changes, the body gets invalidated, and the views that are using the show details property are going to be recomputed. Now, let's move on with the button. So we want to actually rotate the button so that the arrow points down. We can call rotation effect, and we want to rotate it by some degrees. And whenever show detail is true, that means we actually want to point down, we are going to rotate the button by 90 degrees. And if it's false, then it should point to the right again, so we rotate it by 0 degrees. Next, we also want to make the button a little bit bigger. This is done by a so-called scale effect, and this is similar to rotation. Whenever show details is true, that means we want to show the details, we're going to scale it by 1.5, and otherwise we just scale it back to 1. Then we will add some padding that's actually predefined by SwiftUI, and it chooses the right padding automatically for us. And then last but not least, we will add the animation effect, and we will use ease in out. So now, you could notice that the user interface always updates in real time, usually on the right-hand side, but sometimes it pauses the automatic preview. So make sure you hit resume to see our latest updates. Now we can see that the padding was added, as we have done here. And now we can run the app actually to see if our rotating or the animation is working as expected. So let's hit play. So here we can see our little SwiftUI app, and let's see what happens if we click the button. So we actually toggle in between the button, and we're scaling it and rotating it. So let's hit it a couple of times, and we can see that the animation we've implemented on the left-hand side with just a few lines of code is working perfectly. So now let's explore the state variable and the power of it a little bit more. Let's click here inside font, and what we actually want to do whenever show details is true, we just want to change the font of the Hello World text. So as done below, just use the abbreviated if-else statement, and whenever show details is true, we actually want to have a headline label, and otherwise we just use a body label. This should just demonstrate the power of state variables. So let's run the project again. And we can see when we are going to toggle the button rotates and it scales, and also the font of the Hello World text changes. So now this is actually quite powerful. We've done that in just a few lines of code. We can also see live updates whenever we're going to change something inside our code, thanks to the preview provider that is responsible for displaying our content view in the preview on the right-hand side.